Hello, my name is Odessa, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the one they pushed aside. I never thought it would come to this. My sister swapping my heart medication with poison. I collapsed in the kitchen, ended up in the ICU, and when the blood tests exposed the truth, my parents, they hissed, "Say it's an accident. Don't fuss. She was joking." But it wasn't a joke. It never was. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the cops walked in. Why would they do this to me? What have I done to deserve this kind of betrayal? Stay with me, because the truth, my truth, is something you won't believe. I knew something was wrong the moment I opened my medicine box that morning. The pills looked different, a shade lighter, more opaque than usual. At first, I chalked it up to the pharmacy switching to a new generic brand, a minor oversight that could be easily explained. But something nagged at me, as if my gut was trying to tell me something that my mind wasn't ready to process. Still, I swallowed the suspicion down, just like I had so many times before. It had been a long, slow process, learning how to ignore the whispers of doubt in my head. Working in home care, I was no stranger to taking medicine. I was meticulous about it, careful, because I had no choice. I couldn't risk missing a dose. The pills I took every day were more than just part of a routine. They were my lifeline, the only thing keeping my heart from giving out. But today, with the pills sitting in the palm of my hand, I hesitated. The ones I usually took were a rich, deep blue, smooth like polished stones. These were different. I stared at them for a moment longer than I should have before I popped one into my mouth and chased it down with water. Maybe it's a generic brand, I thought. Maybe I'm just overthinking again. Like they always say, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. So I just shook my head and pushed it from my mind. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe deep down, I was just tired of always feeling like the problem. I was tired of second-guessing myself. The day dragged on. I went about my usual routine, made some calls for work, ate lunch alone in the kitchen, and started to get ready for my mom's birthday brunch. She was turning 60 today. It wasn't just another birthday. It was a milestone, and the family would be gathering at the same old family-owned restaurant where we always celebrated, where the air was thick with the scent of freshly baked bread and spilled wine. It was all a blur when I arrived. The room was alive with the usual chatter, the clinking of silverware, and the awkwardness that came from years of unspoken tension. My mother was already seated at the head of the table, basking in the spotlight as usual. My sister, Seraphine, was glowing, of course. She always did. It was impossible not to notice. She was the perfect picture of grace, elegant, composed, flawless, as if everything she touched turned to gold. It's like she lived in a world where no one could see the cracks. She wasn't the problem. I was. "Odessa, sweetheart," my mother called over to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Come on, sit down. Let's not keep everyone waiting." I smiled weakly, though I wasn't sure if anyone could see the faint shadow that hung over me. The dizziness from earlier hadn't quite passed. My chest was tight, my hands shaking just a bit. But no one would notice that. No one was ever looking at me long enough to see. "Let her sit by me," Seraphine cooed, pushing out the chair beside her. "Mom's right. We can't have you hiding over there in the corner." I sat down carefully, placing my hands in my lap. I wasn't sure if it was the headache or the overwhelming feeling of being invisible, but I felt out of place, like I didn't belong in the family photo anymore. Seraphine leaned in, her eyes scanning the room as she spoke in a voice that was just a little too sweet. "It's so good to have everyone together again, right? You know, I think this year will be the best yet." I nodded, even though I couldn't bring myself to believe her. Everything always seemed perfect from where she sat, but from my seat, it was a different story. "Just try not to bring the mood down, okay?" My mother's words floated over to me, casual, but they stung all the same. I froze for a second, then forced a smile. "Of course, Mom." Lorraine, my mother, caught my eye for a split second before looking away, returning to the conversation with Seraphine. "Let your sister shine today. You've had enough attention with your hospital visits." The words hit harder than I expected, sinking deep into the pit of my stomach. I had always been the one to draw attention, but never for the right reasons. I was always the sick one, the one who needed everyone's attention, and I hated it. I hated how easily they dismissed me, how easily they let me fall out of focus when it wasn't convenient. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just let it go, like I always did. The brunch continued, but I felt as if I was watching it through a foggy window. Every word from my family felt distant, every laugh too loud. Seraphine's radiant smile seemed to reflect the light that I could never quite catch. As I tried to focus on the conversation, my vision started to blur again. I rubbed my eyes, but it didn't help. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, faster than it should. The familiar feeling crept up my spine, the one I'd learned to live with since I was a kid. I excused myself from the table, hoping no one would notice the tremor in my hands. "Where are you going?" Seraphine called after me, but I didn't answer. I walked out to the parking lot, my chest tightening with every step, the cool breeze offering little relief. I fumbled through my purse for my medication strip, my fingers unsteady as I pulled it out. The pills were still there, staring back at me, but they looked different again under the dim light of the car. They weren't the same color, not the same shape. I pulled out one pill and stared at it in my palm for a long time, the weight of it sinking in. This was wrong. I wasn't imagining things, but still, I wasn't sure what to do with the thought. Maybe it's nothing, I told myself, even as the doubt gnawed at me. Maybe I'm overreacting. It could be a mistake. Just like they always say, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. But this time, something inside me felt different. The little voice in the back of my head was louder than usual. I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. I shoved the pill strip back into my purse, my eyes narrowing as I stared out the windshield. Just in case I'm not crazy. I woke up that morning with an odd feeling, something I couldn't quite shake off. My body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish, as if the weight of the world had settled on top of me during the night. But I had learned long ago to push through. That's what I did. What I always did. I didn't have the luxury of dwelling on feelings. I had too many responsibilities, too many things to do. After taking a deep breath, I rolled out of bed and headed to the kitchen. The smell of coffee brewing in the corner perked me up, but not by much. I grabbed the cereal box off the counter, poured myself a bowl, and tried to make the most of a slow morning. As I sat down at the table, I looked at my heart medication bottle. It was sitting there, just like every other day, a steady part of my routine. I pulled out the bottle and popped the cap. The pills inside looked slightly different than I remembered. They were a bit more opaque, not as vibrant as they usually were. I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe I was just overthinking it. I was tired. I'd had a long week, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, doubt crept in. Maybe this was a generic version, I reasoned. Maybe the pharmacy had changed the brand. It wasn't uncommon. I popped the pill into my mouth, swallowed it, and took a sip of water. The minutes ticked by, but the tightness in my chest only worsened. My heart was beating louder now, thumping in my ears. I stood up to go to the sink, but the room began to spin around me. My vision blurred, and the faint dizziness I'd been ignoring flared up into something much worse. I grabbed the counter to steady myself, but the buzzing in my head intensified. Panic rose in my chest as I stumbled toward the kitchen table, knocking the glass of water over as I tried to steady myself. I heard it hit the floor, but it felt distant, as if I were underwater. Come on, pull it together, I thought. Just breathe. But it wasn't working. I was sinking. I managed to catch a glimpse of Seraphine entering the room. She looked over at me, standing there, my body swaying. But instead of rushing to help, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, her face lighting up with the familiar glow of an Instagram story being recorded. "Just another day with drama in the background," she said, her voice casual, like she was filming a reality show. A light chuckle escaped her, as if she found some twisted humor in the situation. She didn't even seem to care. I collapsed. My vision went black, and for a moment, all I could hear was the rapid thumping of my heart, pounding louder than the sound of my body hitting the ground. The dizziness, the confusion, the disbelief, it was all too much. As I lay there, helpless, all I could think was, why? Why is this happening? When I finally came to, I was in the ICU, the soft beeping of machines filling my ears, the sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with the cold air, and I blinked, trying to clear my foggy mind. My mother, Lorraine, was sitting beside me, her hand holding mine in a tight grip. "Mom?" My voice was barely a whisper. I could barely remember how I got here, or what happened before. "Oh, sweetie, thank God you're awake," she said, her voice cracking, but there was something forced about it, too much like she was trying to convince herself. Dr. Boone, my cardiologist, was standing nearby, looking at the screen, his face unreadable. "We need to run some toxicology tests," he said. His tone wasn't alarming, but I could tell by the way he paused that this was serious. I turned my head slightly, noticing Seraphine sitting quietly in the corner. And she was crying, but her tears were soft, controlled, too controlled. The moment seemed hollow, empty. And then there was the detective, Detective Juno, standing just outside the door, watching. He didn't speak, but his presence was like a quiet storm, hinting at something I wasn't ready to face. I felt like I was floating in the space between worlds, my body heavy and my mind racing. What had happened? Why didn't Seraphine help me? Why didn't anyone? Later that evening, after I'd been hooked up to more machines than I could count, Lorraine leaned in close, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Say it was an accident," she said urgently, her fingers pressing into my palm like a plea. "You don't want Seraphine's career ruined over a misunderstanding." The words tasted sour in my mouth, as if I had bitten down on a rotten fruit. Career? What about my life? Seraphine, sitting on the other side of the bed, wiped her eyes with a tissue and looked at me. "It was just a joke, Desi. You're not seriously going to make this a thing, are you?" Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I wanted to scream, to call her out on her lies, but I couldn't. My body was too weak, my voice barely a whisper. I stared at the IV drip, the heart monitor beeping steadily, a sound that felt like the only real thing left in the room. My gaze shifted to the medication strip in my purse, still there, still taunting me. The same pills, but now I knew. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't pretend anymore. No more pretending. The days in the ICU felt endless, and yet every moment dragged by, as if time was determined to slow down for me. The beeping of the monitors became a rhythmic reminder that my heart was still beating, that I hadn't slipped away while I was unconscious, though at times I felt as though I were. The doctor came and went, checking on me occasionally, his face unreadable. No one knew what had really happened, but the testing was going to give them answers. I knew it would, but I still wasn't sure I wanted to know. The medication they started giving me was different from the usual pills. The colors were bright and reassuring in their familiarity, but nothing would erase the image of that generic bottle, the new pills I had taken before I collapsed, those pills that might have been the very reason I was lying here, powerless. I thought back to the night of the incident. It wasn't lost on me that, for all the concern my family tried to show, their attention had been superficial. The whispers of, "Just another hospital visit," or "Don't make a scene, Odessa," still hung in the air, like they were meant to remind me of my place. They didn't know me. They never really did. And now, as I lay in that sterile hospital bed, I began to wonder if they ever would. The days dragged on with little change. My body was recovering, but my mind, it was anything but still. Every minute felt like it was spent trying to piece together the truth, trying to figure out what had happened that morning and why no one had seemed to care. And then, one afternoon, Seraphine walked in. I knew she was coming. I could sense it, the way her footsteps echoed down the hall, the way the air seemed to shift when she entered the room. She had always had that effect on me, making everything feel like it revolved around her. She didn't even have to try. It was just natural for her. "Here," she said, placing a bouquet of flowers on the bedside table with a gentle thud. The smile on her face was as perfect as ever, her posture poised and elegant, as if she'd just come from an art gallery opening rather than a family hospital visit. I glanced at the flowers, bright lilies, fresh-cut daisies, pretty enough to be part of a staged photo, but they did nothing for me. "I'm glad to see you're awake, Odessa," she said, as if she were simply remarking on the weather, her tone light and casual. "You always were the dramatic one, huh?" I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I wasn't interested in hearing her version of things. I wasn't interested in hearing her shallow words about how sorry she was for what had happened. I wasn't interested in her empty gestures anymore. Seraphine didn't seem bothered by my silence. She just continued with her act, a performance she had perfected over the years. She stayed there for a while, talking about how chaotic life had been and how difficult it was to juggle everything. All the while, I was trapped in my thoughts, battling the urge to scream. How could she talk about chaos when she wasn't the one who had almost died? How could she talk about difficulty when she had no idea what it was like to be dismissed for something that was beyond your control? Finally, she stood, straightened her dress, and picked up her phone, already setting up her next Instagram story. "I'll leave you to rest, Desi. Get well soon," she said with a quick peck on my forehead. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Before she left, she slid a card into my hand. I opened it, feeling a sense of indifference as I read the message. "Let's not make this a circus." I stared at the card for a moment, my fingers trembling. The words weren't just a dismissal. They were a reminder that Seraphine always expected to be in control, to keep everything perfect and clean. If I made noise, if I made this something bigger than it was, I would ruin her facade. I would ruin her carefully crafted world. The tears that had been held back for so long finally began to well up, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Not again. Later that day, after Seraphine had left, I lay there thinking, remembering things from the past, things I had tried to forget. I remembered that summer when I was 17. I had fainted from the heat while we were on vacation. It was supposed to be a fun trip, a break from the hospital visits, but I had gotten sick. I wasn't allowed to go to the beach that day. I had to stay in the hotel room with my mother, who wasn't exactly a comforting presence. Seraphine had been the star of the day, as usual. She had gone on and on about how she had to wear her new swimsuit because someone had to look good while the rest of us were just pretending to have fun. I hadn't even realized how much that had hurt me until now. My mother had just nodded, agreeing that Seraphine was right. That pattern had never changed. Seraphine's success, her beauty, her ability to charm everyone, she could do no wrong, and I was always the afterthought. Shaking my head, I turned my attention back to the task at hand, finding out the truth about the pills. My body may have been recovering, but my mind was still racing. I reached for my purse and pulled out the pill strip, carefully inspecting it. It didn't feel real. These weren't my usual pills. I grabbed my phone and Googled the pill imprint. I could feel the pit in my stomach grow larger as the results loaded on the screen. These weren't heart medication. These were calming supplements, the kind you could buy over the counter for stress relief. I felt the world around me tilt. No, this can't be real. But it was. The evidence was right there in front of me. I walked to the door and found Lorraine, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Mom," I said quietly, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "The pills. They weren't the ones I was prescribed. There's something else." She barely looked up, her voice distracted. "You're overanalyzing again, Odessa. They're just pills." Just pills. I could feel the weight of the words crash over me, but I didn't have the energy to fight it anymore. They didn't get it. None of them ever had. I had to know the truth, and if no one else was going to believe me, I would have to find it on my own. That night, as I lay there in bed, I called Seraphine on speakerphone. Nadine was sitting next to me, listening quietly. "Did you touch my medication?" I asked softly, keeping my voice steady. Seraphine let out a short laugh, as if I'd just told a joke. "You're welcome for managing your mess, Desi. Don't forget who always cleans up after you." Her words cut through me, deeper than I wanted to admit. She wasn't sorry, not at all. And I realized then that I wasn't going to get the truth from her. She would lie, just like always. Before I could say anything more, Lorraine stormed into the room, her face flushed with anger. "You will not attack your sister after everything she's done for you," she yelled, the words hitting me like a slap. But I wasn't going to back down anymore. I wasn't going to stay silent. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the phone, the silence between us growing louder. I was done pretending. I had to fight for the truth now. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating in its silence. The days that followed the confrontation were full of tension, but little relief. I had expected them to at least try to apologize, or maybe even show a shred of concern. But instead, it was as if nothing had happened at all. I was trapped in my own thoughts, struggling to put the pieces together. I kept coming back to that moment when I had asked Seraphine if she had touched my medication. I couldn't shake the way she had dismissed me so easily, like I was just another one of her problems to ignore, the way her voice had turned cold, calculating. "You're welcome for managing your mess," she had said. I wasn't crazy, I knew that. But why did no one else seem to care? The next morning, Lorraine came to visit me at the hospital. She was holding a gift bag, her face unreadable. "I brought you something," she said, setting it on the bedside table before sitting down beside me. Her voice was softer than usual, as if trying to be gentle with me. "It's something that belonged to your grandmother. I thought you might want it." She pulled out a vintage necklace, a beautiful, intricate piece that had been passed down through the family for generations. It shimmered in the light, delicate and heavy at the same time. She placed it around my neck, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted it. "I've kept this for you, sweetie," she said, her voice almost pleading. "But you need to stop making a scene. You're upsetting everyone." I didn't speak right away. The weight of the necklace felt like the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. How many times had I been told to keep quiet, to just let things go? How many times had I sacrificed my own well-being to keep the peace? "I won't make a scene," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm not going to stay silent anymore." Lorraine's expression hardened. She didn't say anything else. She just stared at me, a frown creasing her brow as she stood up and left the room without another word. It wasn't a surprise. Lorraine had always been the one to sweep things under the rug, to make everything seem perfect on the surface. She couldn't handle the messiness of real life, the rawness of emotions and truth. But I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. Not this time. After she left, I found myself staring at the necklace in the mirror. The delicate gold chain glinted back at me, and for the first time, I didn't feel the slightest bit of comfort from it. It was just another tool to keep me in line, to remind me of my place in this family. I needed answers. I needed to know the truth about what had happened with my medication, and I wasn't going to wait around for them to give it to me. That afternoon, I picked up the phone and called the pharmacy. After a few minutes of waiting, a clerk finally picked up. "How can I help you?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but inside, my heart was racing. "I need to know if there's any record of my prescription being changed recently, specifically, my heart medication." The pause on the other end felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke. "Ma'am, I can confirm that your prescription was changed. The original medication was swapped without your authorization, and the new pills were filled by a different supplier." My stomach churned. "Are you telling me that someone tampered with my prescription?" "I'm afraid so. The records show that it was processed through a different pharmacy, but we have no record of any changes being authorized by you." I sat there, staring at the phone, my fingers trembling. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I hung up, my mind racing. I had proof. I had proof that someone had tampered with my medication. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to take this to Dr. Boone. I called his office immediately. After a few rings, his voice came on the line. "Dr. Boone," he said, his tone businesslike. "Dr. Boone, I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found out that my medication was swapped, and I'm pretty sure my hospital records have been tampered with too." There was a long pause on the other end. "I don't know what you're talking about, Odessa," he said, his voice hesitant. "I don't think there's been any issue with your records. I'm telling you, there's something wrong. And if something happens to me again, I'll be coming for you too." He was quiet for a moment before sighing. "I'll look into it. But you need to understand that this is a complicated situation. We can't just—" "I won't be silenced anymore," I cut him off. "This ends now." The conversation ended there, but I could feel the weight of it settle into my chest. This wasn't just about the medication. This was about everything I had endured over the years, my family's denial, the constant dismissal of my pain, the manipulation that had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. Later that night, we sat down for dinner, and I decided it was time to confront them all. I wasn't going to wait any longer. Lorraine, Seraphine, and even Nadine were gathered around the table, eating quietly, almost too quietly. They knew I had something to say. I placed my fork down, my hands shaking slightly as I looked around the table. "You tampered with my medication," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know the truth, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Seraphine's face went pale. Lorraine's expression remained as cold as ever. Nadine, sitting next to me, didn't say a word. "Odessa," Lorraine said, her voice sharp. "You're overreacting. This is a family issue. Let it go." Seraphine sighed dramatically, looking down at her plate. "You've always had these issues, Odessa, but you're so selfish." The words stung, but I refused to back down. "I'm not the one who's selfish," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm the one who's been manipulated my entire life, and I'm done with it." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "You're making things worse than they are. You should be grateful for everything we've done for you." I stood up from the table, my heart pounding. "No more. I will not stay silent anymore." Later that night, I made the decision to take action. I reached out to a lawyer, someone I knew could help me get the truth out. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was done letting them control the narrative. As I sat down to write the first letter, my phone buzzed. It was a call from my lawyer. "We've found something," he said. "More tampering with the hospital records. But there's more. A confession." The air in the room felt thick, and I knew something was about to change. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I sat there in the quiet of my hospital room, staring at the phone in my hand. My breath caught in my throat as I read the message. "I have information about Seraphine's plan. It's worse than you think." I had hoped for an answer, for something that would explain it all, but I wasn't ready for this. The weight of those words pressed down on me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. What had Seraphine done? How far had she gone? I didn't have time to dwell on it. There were bigger things at stake now. I had already spent too long letting others control the narrative of my life. It was time for me to fight back, for me to take control of my own story. The first step was confronting her, something I had avoided for years. But I wasn't that person anymore. The quiet, submissive girl who let everyone walk all over her. That afternoon, Seraphine came to visit me. She walked into the room with a smile plastered on her face, holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a card in the other. The same card she always handed me when she thought she could make everything better with a little gesture of affection. "You always were the dramatic one, huh?" she said, sitting down beside me without waiting for me to speak. Her words hit me like a slap. For the first time, I realized the full extent of her manipulations. She was always in control, always turning everything back on me, making me feel like I was the problem. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let her control me any longer. I remained silent, my gaze fixed on her as she babbled on about how much she cared and how everything would be fine. I let her continue for a few minutes until finally I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Is that really how you feel, Seraphine?" I asked quietly, my voice steady. "Do you really think I'm the dramatic one?" She looked at me, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You've been manipulating me my whole life," I said, my voice growing louder. "Every time something went wrong, you made it my fault. Every time I struggled, you turned it into something for you to benefit from." Her face twisted in confusion, and I saw the flicker of something in her eyes, something I had never noticed before. It was fear, real fear. For the first time, Seraphine wasn't in control. "I didn't mean for you to suffer," she said, her voice shaking. "But I wanted the attention. I wanted people to stop feeling sorry for you." My heart dropped into my stomach. The truth, raw and ugly, was finally out in the open. It wasn't just about the medication. It was about everything, about years of being ignored, belittled, and discarded by the person who was supposed to be my closest ally. "You don't get to take that from me anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. You don't get to make me the villain in your story. I turned away from her, feeling a lump form in my throat. The emotional weight of it all was crushing, but I wasn't going to cry. Not this time. Later that evening, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't let this go any longer. I started by gathering the evidence: phone calls, hospital records, anything that could prove what had happened. The evidence was damning, and the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. My family had been covering up the truth for years. I called the pharmacy to confirm what I already suspected. They confirmed that my medication had been switched, that someone had changed the prescription without my consent. They also confirmed that the records had been altered. The phone call was a turning point. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I couldn't stop now. I had to do something with this information. I took a deep breath and dialed Dr. Boone's number. When he picked up, I didn't waste any time. "Dr. Boone, I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know about the tampered records, the switched medication. I know everything." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Odessa," he said finally, his voice hesitant. "This isn't something we can just—" "Don't you dare try to downplay this," I interrupted. "If something happens to me again, I'm coming for you too." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone. I had never felt more powerful, more in control. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I stopped letting them make the decisions for me. That night, I sat down with Lorraine and Seraphine at the dinner table. Yet I was ready to confront them once and for all. "Do you know what's going on with me?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Do you know what's happening to my life? You've been covering it up for years." Lorraine didn't look at me. She didn't even seem to hear me. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," she said, waving me off. "It's just a mistake, a misunderstanding." I felt my chest tighten, the frustration bubbling up. "This isn't a misunderstanding. You're covering for Seraphine. You've always covered for her." Seraphine, ever the perfect picture of composure, looked at me with feigned innocence. "You're just being dramatic," she said. "You always are." I shook my head, my fists clenching on the table. "I'm done with being the scapegoat," I said, my voice low. "I'm done being the problem in your eyes. I've spent my whole life trying to please you, but I'm not doing it anymore." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, Odessa." "Maybe I will," I said, standing up. "But I'm already regretting every day I spent pretending everything was okay." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I felt like I was finally free from their hold, but I knew the road ahead would be long. The next morning, I reached out to a lawyer. I was done being silenced. I had enough evidence, enough strength to fight back. The lawyer's office called me a few hours later. "We found more," he said. "There's more tampering with the hospital records, but there's more. A confession." The words hit me like a freight train. A confession. It was happening. The truth was coming out. I looked at the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The final blow was coming. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My heart raced with each passing second. This was it. The moment I had been building up to, preparing for. I wasn't about to let fear or hesitation hold me back any longer. I had gathered every shred of evidence, every recording, every statement, every altered record. There was no turning back now. I clicked send, submitting all the gathered information to the authorities and my lawyer. The weight of it settled in my chest like a stone. My decision had been made. The truth would finally come to light, no matter the cost. I sat back in my chair, feeling the rush of adrenaline followed by a strange calm. The fight was no longer in the shadows. It was in the open now. The world would see what I had been forced to endure for so long. It was time for Seraphine to face the consequences of her actions. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and anxious waiting. But in the back of my mind, I knew Seraphine wouldn't just sit idly by. She would retaliate, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. I wasn't wrong. The first message came late one night, just as I was about to fall asleep. It was from Seraphine. "If you don't drop this, you'll ruin the family name for good. I won't let you do this to us. Think about what you're doing." I read the message several times, trying trying to make sense of it. The cold threat was unmistakable. She wasn't concerned about me. She was concerned about her own reputation, her own life. I sent a simple reply. I'm not backing down. The next day, at the family meeting, the tension was unbearable. The usual pretense of civility was gone. Seraphine tried to gaslight me again, turning the situation back on me as if I were the one causing all this chaos. This is all just a misunderstanding, she said, her voice oozing with fake sweetness. You're making a fool of yourself, Odessa. I felt the bile rise in my throat, but I held it in. I was done letting her manipulate me. No, I said firmly, looking her straight in the eye. This is not a misunderstanding. You've been lying to everyone, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. Lorraine's face twisted in frustration. You don't know what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart. I stood up, feeling the weight of the truth settle over me like armor. You know what? If tearing this family apart means exposing the lies, then so be it, I snapped. Because I am done being your scapegoat. I'm done with your silence. I'm done with your manipulation. Seraphine's expression faltered for a moment, and I saw something I had never seen before, vulnerability. But it quickly morphed into rage. She stood up, throwing her hands in the air in exasperation. You'll regret this, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. I didn't flinch. No, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. I won't. Later that evening, I received a call from my lawyer. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when everything I had worked for would come to fruition. We've gathered more evidence, the lawyer said. We've found tampered records and a statement from a pharmacy worker about Seraphine's involvement. This is more than we expected. The relief I felt was overwhelming. For so long, I had wondered if anyone would believe me, if anyone would take me seriously. But now, with this new evidence, it felt like I was finally getting the justice I deserved. I knew it, I said quietly, more to myself than to the lawyer. I knew it wasn't just in my head. The weight of the burden I had been carrying for so long started to lighten, but I knew this was only the beginning. Seraphine wouldn't go down easily. I couldn't let my guard down now. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, phone calls, and strategy meetings. My family tried to distance themselves from me even more, and Seraphine continued her attempts to control the narrative. But I wasn't backing down. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when I received another message. This one, however, was different. It wasn't from Seraphine. The message was from an anonymous source. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. I know exactly what Seraphine did, it read. And I have proof. The final piece is here. I stared at the words for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. The final piece? What did that mean? Who was this person, and what did they know? I quickly typed back. Who are you? What do you have? The response came almost instantly. Meet me in the parking lot of the old warehouse on 5th and Main, 6 p.m. You'll get the proof you need. My stomach turned with a mix of anticipation and dread. Was this a trap? Or was this the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I could finally expose everything? I didn't hesitate. I was going to find out the truth. No more playing it safe. No more silence. I got into my car and drove to the warehouse. As I approached the desolate building, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to cross a line I could never come back from. I parked the car, my fingers gripping the steering wheel as I looked around. The darkness of the night settled in, and the only sound was the faint hum of distant traffic. Then I saw a figure step out of the shadows. It was a man, wearing a hooded jacket. He walked towards my car with deliberate steps, and I rolled down the window. He didn't speak at first, just handed me an envelope. I opened it quickly, my heart pounding. Inside was a set of photos. Photos of Seraphine, photos of her with someone I didn't recognize, meeting secretly with someone from the pharmacy. The photos were clear, damning evidence of her deceit. This is all the proof you need, the man said, his voice low. Now you can finish this. I stared at the photos, my hands shaking as I realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. This wasn't just about the medication. It was about power, control, and greed. And Seraphine had used everything, including our family, to get what she wanted. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what this means. The man nodded, stepping back into the shadows before disappearing into the night. I sat there for a moment, processing everything. I had the proof now. The final piece was here, and I wasn't going to stop until Seraphine paid for everything she had done. I sat there, staring at the message on my phone, my heart racing with every word that flashed across the screen. It felt like a weight lifted off my chest, but it also made the path ahead even clearer. No more turning back. This was the moment. The endgame was in sight. Seraphine's desperate little video had gone viral, just like I knew it would. It was a calculated attempt to manipulate, to play the victim. Her face, smeared with tears, claimed that she never meant to hurt anyone, that all she wanted was to be loved, to be seen as someone who always stood by me. She even had the nerve to say, I've always been there for my sister, but she's accusing me of things I never did. She framed herself as the martyr in this twisted family drama. I watched the video from the comfort of my kitchen, my hands trembling as I gripped my phone. The anger bubbled inside me, but it was different this time. It wasn't the kind of rage that blinded me. No, it was cold and sharp, focused. I had seen her lies for so long that now her act barely even fazed me. This is your last game, I muttered under my breath. You're done now. I set my phone down with a slam and took a deep breath. I wasn't just going to let her destroy my life any longer. This was it. The truth would come out, no matter how many lies she threw at me. The trial was the next step. The real battle. The following morning, I was in court, standing tall in front of everyone who had ever doubted me. The room was packed, and every eye seemed to be focused on me. The weight of the moment hit me again, but this time it was different. This wasn't just about proving my point to my family. It was about securing justice for all the pain I had endured. The doors to the courtroom opened, and Nadine walked in. She had agreed to testify on my behalf. This was the breakthrough I needed. As she took the stand, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally be enough to bring the darkness to light. Nadine, can you please tell the court what you know about the events leading up to Odessa's collapse? The attorney asked, his voice calm but firm. Nadine took a deep breath, her hands steady. She had been through this kind of thing before, but I could tell she still felt the weight of it. She was doing this for me, for us. I've known Odessa for years, Nadine began. She came to me more than once about her episodes. The dizziness, the nausea, the confusion. At first, I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew something wasn't right. And when she started telling me about the medication, that's when it all clicked. I was there when Seraphine gave her those pills. I knew they weren't right. The courtroom went silent as Nadine recounted the moments I had only whispered to her. She spoke with clarity, without hesitation, about the signs she had noticed. She confirmed my fears, the manipulation, the tampering, the deliberate attempts to undermine me. Seraphine and Lorraine sat at the other end of the room, their faces masks of feigned disbelief. Seraphine's eyes flickered toward me, her expression filled with loathing. I met her gaze without flinching. The truth was out. She couldn't hide behind her mask any longer. Thank you, Nadine, the lawyer said, his voice low, but I could see the relief in his eyes. It wasn't over yet, but this was a crucial step forward. Nadine's testimony wasn't the end, though. It was the beginning of everything that followed. As the session continued, I watched Seraphine squirm in her seat. Her perfect act was falling apart in front of her, and she knew it. She had spent years controlling the narrative, but now the truth was unraveling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. You can't control this anymore, I whispered to myself, watching her every move. Seraphine's eyes burned with anger as she glared at me from the witness stand, but I didn't look away. She could try to manipulate me all she wanted, but I was stronger than that now. The fight was out in the open. No more secrets, no more silence. And then, she lost it. In the middle of the court proceedings, Seraphine snapped. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You ruined everything, she screamed at me. This was supposed to be my life. You don't get to destroy me. The judge called for order, his gavel striking the air with a sharp thud. The room fell into chaos as Seraphine's anger erupted, but I wasn't shaken. Not anymore. I stood up slowly, my eyes locked on hers, my voice steady and clear. I'm not destroying you, I said. I'm exposing you. The room was deathly silent for a moment. Even Seraphine seemed stunned by my calmness, but I knew I was right. For once, I wasn't the one in the shadows. The truth was my ally. The judge called for a break, but I didn't need one. This was the turning point. My family couldn't hide anymore. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. Later that evening, as I sat in the quiet of my office, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. We have the final piece of evidence, he said, his voice grave. It's about Seraphine's pharmacy contact. This could be the nail in her coffin. I leaned back in my chair, a rush of relief flooding through me. Finally, it was almost over. The last piece was in place. The battle for my life, my future, was nearing its end. I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't. Not now. The phone call ended, and I sat there, letting the weight of it all sink in. The truth would come out, and Seraphine couldn't stop it anymore. I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. It felt like the calm before the storm. But the storm was already here. The end was near. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. The courtroom was eerily silent as I took my seat, my palms sweaty and my heart hammering in my chest. This was it, the day I'd been waiting for. The final showdown. The truth would finally be set free. No more lies, no more pretending. This was the end of Seraphine's reign over me. It was time to take control, to take back what she had stolen. The room was full, everyone watching, waiting for the moment when everything would come to light. Seraphine, sitting across the room, her face pale but her eyes cold with defiance, was about to be exposed. There was no way out for her now. I stood up, my legs shaking, but I refused to let fear take hold. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the words I was about to speak. This wasn't just about the years of suffering I had endured. This wasn't even about revenge. It was about setting things right, about making sure that Seraphine, and everyone else who had been complicit in my misery, faced the consequences of their actions. As I stood in front of the judge, my voice rang clear and steady through the room. Your Honor, for years I've been silenced. For years I've been manipulated, gaslighted, and poisoned, both literally and emotionally. But today, I'm not here to cry or beg for sympathy. I'm here to expose the truth. I paused, taking a breath. I looked at Seraphine, who was sitting there, still trying to maintain her composure. You tried to kill me, but you also set me free, I said, the words falling from my lips like a weight lifted from my chest. The courtroom fell into a deep, stunned silence. The room was heavy with the truth, and I could feel the collective gasp from those around me. Seraphine's face shifted, her lips trembling as she tried to hide the shock. It was the first crack in her armor. Seraphine's last attempt to play the victim came in the form of a video she posted online just hours before the trial. She painted herself as the long-suffering sister, the misunderstood one, claiming that all of this had been a mistake. She cried crocodile tears, begging for sympathy, saying, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I've always been there for my sister, but she's accusing me of things I never did. I just want my family back. I watched that video from my phone before I walked into the courtroom, seething. How dare she? How dare she try to turn the tables on me again? I was done being her victim. I was done letting her get away with everything. At the witness stand, Seraphine, looking visibly shaken now, tried one last desperate plea. I was just trying to get attention, she yelled, her voice cracking. This is all just a misunderstanding. I never meant for any of this to happen. But her breakdown felt hollow, a performance she had put on too many times. The tears she shed weren't for me or for the truth. They were for herself, a last-ditch attempt to salvage her image. I didn't flinch. I had heard it all before. I had lived it for years. And now, I wasn't the one who needed saving. She was. You didn't make a mistake, Seraphine, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You made a choice. Seraphine froze, her mouth hanging open as if the words hadn't fully registered in her mind. She knew I was right, but she couldn't admit it, not in front of all these people. The judge sat quietly, weighing everything that had been said. He had heard the testimonies, seen the evidence, and now it was time for the final decision. I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on me, but I didn't let it affect me. And this was my moment. I had fought for this, and I wasn't going to back down now. The judge finally spoke, his voice stern and clear. In light of the evidence presented today, I find the defendant, Seraphine Williams, guilty of attempted murder, tampering with medication, and poisoning. She is sentenced to 18 years in prison. The words hit me like a wave. 18 years. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. It was justice, finally served after all these years. I stayed in my seat, my face still, but inside, a wave of relief washed over me. It wasn't over, but it was a victory. As the judge turned to my parents, I couldn't help but feel a sharp pang of disappointment. They had tried to shield Seraphine for so long, protecting her at my expense. Now, it was their turn to face the consequences. Lorraine and Seraphine's father were sentenced to probation for obstruction of justice. The judge made it clear that their role in this was just as damaging, and though they wouldn't face jail time, they would carry the stain of this scandal for the rest of their lives. My lawyer stood next to me, a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "You've won." For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The chains were broken, and I was free. But even as I stood there, a new emotion began to settle inside me. It wasn't happiness or triumph. It was something deeper, something more profound. Seraphine was being led away in handcuffs, her expression twisted with rage. She shot me one last look as she was escorted out, her voice barely a whisper as she hissed, "You won't ever be free. You'll always be broken." I stared at her, my eyes unwavering. "Maybe," I replied, my voice calm, "but I'm alive, and that's more than you'll ever be." As the doors to the courtroom closed behind her, I felt the weight of the past few months finally lift. The tension, the fear, the anger, it all faded into the background. I had made it. I had finally done it. As I left the courtroom, my thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of my phone. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. I answered, my voice cautious. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but calm. "I've been following your case. I think you could help others who've been through what you have." I paused for a moment, taking in the words. "Who is this?" "You'll know soon enough," the voice said, the mystery lingering in the air. "This is just the beginning." And just like that, I knew my fight wasn't over. This had been for me, but it could be for others too. As I walked out into the bright daylight, I felt lighter than I had in years. The storm had passed, but the winds of change were still blowing strong. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was something more, something stronger. The court decision was final. The truth had come out, and the weight I'd carried for years was finally lifted. But as I stepped out of the courtroom, I knew that the real journey was only just beginning. The fight for freedom, for healing, for rebuilding my life, it wasn't over yet. The scars would remain, but they no longer had the power to control me. The road ahead was mine to walk. It wasn't long before I received the letter, the one that would formally sever all ties with my parents. The letter from the court stated that Lorraine and my father were no longer allowed to contact me, even for family emergencies. The cold finality of those words hit harder than I thought they would. I thought I'd feel empty. I thought I'd feel guilty. But as I stared at the letter in my hands, I realized I felt free. I signed the document, knowing that this was the only way I could start over. For so long, I'd been trying to make the pieces fit, trying to maintain some semblance of family, but now it was clear I couldn't heal while I was still tied to a toxic past. "I thought I'd feel empty," I whispered to myself, "but I feel free." The relief wasn't immediate, but it came slowly. The next step was clear. I needed to move out. I had lived in that house for far too long, and it was filled with memories of manipulation, betrayal, and pain. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, away from the past that had haunted me for so long. The apartment was modest, but it was mine. I spent the next few days cleaning and decorating, making it my own, a peaceful sanctuary where I could begin to heal. I hung up pictures, arranged my books, and set up a cozy reading nook by the window. I didn't need much, but what I did need was space to breathe, to grow, and to rebuild. One day, as I sat in the cafe around the corner, sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone, I saw something that caught my eye. A flyer posted on the bulletin board for a support group for survivors of family abuse. My heart skipped a beat. I smiled as I read it. If you've been hurt, you're not alone. Let's talk. Let's heal together. I couldn't help but feel that this was a sign. I had been through so much, but now I had an opportunity to help others. My pain, my suffering, it could be used to heal others. I signed up the next day. As I walked into the first meeting, I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. But when I saw the group of people gathered around the room, each of them with their own stories, their own pain, but also their own strength, I felt something I hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. I wasn't alone. I began attending the meetings regularly. I became an active member of the group, sharing my story, listening to others, and offering support. And then, as time went on, I became the one to organize the meetings, the one to help others find their voice. During one of the sessions, a woman spoke up, her voice shaky but full of determination. I thought I was alone, but hearing you all speak made me realize I can fight back too. Those words stuck with me long after the meeting ended. My journey had not just been about my own healing, it was about helping others, lifting them up, and showing them that there was hope, that no matter how deep the pain, there was always a way to rise above it. As I stood there, surrounded by people who had once felt like I did, broken, isolated, powerless, I realized that I wasn't just healing myself. I was helping others heal too. And that, in itself, was more powerful than any victory I could have ever hoped for. I reflected on my journey, on how far I had come, on the people I had met along the way, and the people I had helped. I was finally free, yes. But more than that, I had found purpose. I had found my voice, my strength, and my courage. I still have scars, I thought to myself, but they don't control me. I'm the one who writes my story now. The road to healing was long. It still is. There are days when I feel the weight of it all, days when the past threatens to swallow me whole. But every time that happens, I remind myself of who I am now. I remind myself that I'm no longer the victim. I'm not the one who hides in the shadows, pretending everything is fine while the world around me crumbles. I'm the one who fought for my freedom. I'm the one who stood up, even when I thought I couldn't. And then, as I was preparing for another support group meeting, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. It was an email from someone I didn't recognize. I opened it, my heart racing. The message was simple but powerful. Your story saved my daughter's life. Thank you for helping us see the truth before it was too late. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes as I read those words. I had done something good. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my pain had purpose. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was a story that had helped someone else, that had made a difference in the world. And just like that, I knew that everything I had been through, every tear, every moment of doubt, every bit of suffering, it had all led me here, to this moment, to this new chapter. This was just the beginning.